He started with $40 in his pocket, no high school diploma, no wealthy family, no connections, and no one in his corner. And yet, he went on to build one of the most recognizable fast food chains on the entire planet. This is the true story of Dave Thomas, the man behind Wendys. And trust me, this one is worth sticking around for. Dave Thomas was born on July 2nd, 1932, in Atlantic City, New Jersey. His biological mother was young and unprepared, and just 6 weeks after his birth, she surrendered him to an adoption agency. 6 months later, he was taken in by Rex and Alva Thomas. But stability was never something Dave got to enjoy for long. When he was just 5 years old, his adoptive mother Alva died of rheumatic fever, leaving him with a father who struggled emotionally and financially. Rex moved constantly, bouncing from state to state, living in cramped trailers and run-down boarding houses. A new stepmother entered the picture and made things worse. She was controlling and cold, and Dave increasingly felt invisible in his own home. Eventually, his dad's second marriage collapsed too, and the two ended up in a small apartment with no kitchen. That meant eating out every single day. And while that sounds miserable on paper, it became something unexpectedly meaningful for Dave. Those meals at local diners were the only moments he truly felt connected to his father. He would sit there watching other families laugh together, parents wiping their kids' faces, people just being present with each other. Something clicked in his young mind. Restaurants weren't just about food, they were about belonging. At 8 years old, he quietly decided that one day he would open his own restaurant. That dream would take decades to become real, but he never once let go of it. By the time Dave was 10, home was so unpleasant that he started looking for work just to have somewhere else to be. He lied about his age, applying to every restaurant he could find, got turned down every time, and ended up taking odd jobs at a gas station, grocery store, and bowling alley. At 12, he got fired from a Walgreens after they found out how young he actually was. But eventually he landed a real restaurant job in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he absorbed everything he could: the rhythm of the kitchen, the standards of service, the discipline required to do the work well. When his family moved again to Fort Wayne, Indiana, Dave refused to uproot his life this time. He stayed behind at 14, working 50 hours a week and squeezing in schoolwork at night. By the end of 10th grade, he made a decision that shocked people around him. He dropped out, not because he was lazy, but because everything he needed to learn was already happening in the kitchen. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, Dave enlisted early and volunteered for kitchen duty in the military. He was cooking for thousands of soldiers at a time, and his work ethic earned him a promotion to staff sergeant at just 18. By the time he returned to civilian life in 1953, he was no longer just a cook, he was a leader. Back at what was now called the Hobby Ranch House in Fort Wayne, Dave worked his way up to manager and married a waitress named Lorraine Buskirk. Life was moving forward, but the restaurant was struggling financially. Then one evening, Dave was introduced to a man who would reshape his entire future. That man was Colonel Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Sanders was traveling the country pitching his pressure-fried chicken recipe to restaurant owners. Dave's boss Phil signed the deal, and after months of perfecting the technique, KFC arrived at the Hobby Ranch house. The response was immediate. Lines stretched out the door. Dave spotted an opportunity nobody else had noticed and created a dedicated space just for takeout orders, helping pioneer one of the first real carryout sections in the industry. By 1959, Phil had expanded to 4 more locations in Columbus, Ohio, but they were hemorrhaging money. Phil was $250,000 in debt and on the verge of losing everything. He turned to Dave with a desperate offer: save these restaurants and earn 40% ownership for just $65. Dave had 4 kids at home, a stable income, and every rational reason to say no, but he trusted his instincts. In January 1962, with only $40 in his pocket, he drove to Columbus and got to work. He fired the managers, streamlined the menu, tightened operations, and created a revolving bucket sign that made the restaurants impossible to miss. Within 6 months, sales had exploded. By 1968, KFC was buying back its franchises, and Dave sold his shares for over $1.5 million. He had gone from $40 to a millionaire. But he was bored. Something was still missing. That something was his own restaurant. While managing a seafood franchise called Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips, Dave kept describing to his friend Len Imke a burger place he dreamed of opening, one built around freshness, quality, and simplicity. Len owned a former steakhouse building with an empty dining space and offered it to Dave for $250 a month. The deal was done before Dave had even thought twice. For the name, Dave looked to his own family. His daughter, Melinda Lou, had a nickname her siblings gave her because they struggled with her real name. They called her Wendy. Dave tweaked it slightly. Wendy. On November 15th, 1969, the first Wendys opened in Columbus, Ohio. The mayor showed up. The line stretched down the street. Within 6 weeks, the restaurant was already profitable. Dave introduced square burger patties deliberately hanging over the bun edges to show customers exactly what they were getting. Fresh beef, never frozen, made to order. Then he experimented with a drive-through window on the side of the building, and it doubled his sales overnight. By 1973, he began franchising, not individual locations, but entire cities and regions at once. In 1973, there were 4 Wendy's restaurants. By 1978, there were 1,000. Within another 18 months, 2,000. It became the fastest-growing fast food chain in American history and the first restaurant to hit $1 billion in annual sales within its first decade. Then came the famous 1984 advertising campaign with the line, "Nobody forgot." 3 words that made Wendy's a cultural phenomenon and drove revenue up 30% in a single year. By then, Wendy's was the 3rd largest hamburger chain in the world. Dave stepped back from daily operations in 1982, but the company drifted without him. Quality slipped, expansion outpaced management, and by 1985, nearly 20% of locations were close to bankruptcy. Dave came back. He brought in Jim Neer to stabilize operations, and then he agreed to become the face of Wendy's advertising himself. He appeared in over 800 commercials, more than any other individual in advertising history, and his plain-spoken honesty won over an entire generation of customers. The company went from losing nearly $5 million in 1989 to earning $78 million by 1993. But perhaps Dave's most lasting legacy had nothing to do with burgers at all. Having been adopted himself, he founded the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption in 1992 to help children in foster care find permanent, loving homes. Dave Thomas passed away on January 8, 2002, from liver cancer at the age of 69. Today, Wendy's operates more than 7,000 locations across 30 countries, generating over $14 billion in system-wide sales annually. And it all started with a lonely kid eating hamburgers in a diner, dreaming of a place where everyone felt like they belonged. Years later, that dream became a place where families gathered, memories were made, and strangers felt at home. Because sometimes the biggest ideas begin with the simplest wish, to make people smile. And that's how a lonely kid's dream became Wendy's.